It's the Alex Jones Show on this Sunday, live edition, September 28, 2014. Riding shotgun is David Knight. We're going to go to your calls now. First up is Byron in Pennsylvania, who wants to talk about a shelter-in-place warning in Pennsylvania. Byron, go ahead.
Yes, it's Brian, but anyway, yeah, I'm surprised it wasn't picked up or covered here because it's, pretty big. They've been searching people's houses and everything for this guy that shot up police barracks.
Is that a breaking story? Did that happen just recently?
That actually happened over a week ago, and it's still happening.
Right, so they've got areas of Pennsylvania locked down then because of this incident.
Yeah.
So
That's
what's happening there?
Mention it.
So tell us what's happening.
What's happening is they've had stories on the news about, not like I saw one article and put it all together, but they had stories on the news about food being donated for people who were sheltering away from their homes and stuff like that, and for the police, and, it's all crazy.
That's interesting. We'll have to look into that. It's not something that I picked up on, but definitely we'll take a look into that. Thanks for the call. Janitor in FEMA Region 9, go ahead.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. What's your point today?
Fantastic. I just want to talk about the 10 companies that own us and how Mr. Jones was talking about boycotting. There's an article on HuffPost. It's a pretty old one. It's called "These 10 Companies Control Enormous Numbers of Consumer Brands," and it just keeps continuously getting bigger. And in order to control these globalists, it's very systematic and very simple to do. You look at the brands, and you systematically stop buying the brands in, just-in-time type of a way. You cut the money supply off, and there's no need to, I'm not saying that propagandizing it or whatnot, but that's how you basically cut the arms of these very slowly with their own capital. And if you look at that list, and that list it's very old. It's about from 2012. It keeps getting bigger and every day, and how the monopolies control it in every single brand. For example,
so what are the top two companies on the list?
It's Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Johnson & Johnson. Procter & Gamble owns the Lacoste perfumes. I mean, you just have to. You can't buy Coca-Cola at Pizza Hut because Pepsi owns it. So it's very systematic, and
do you think
if you go about it,
so, David, do you think that the power of boycotting companies still has influence in the modern era?
Well, I guess my first reaction would be that if this is a couple of years old, it's probably not 10 companies now. It's maybe 8 or 7 because they keep consolidating. But yeah, I think it's very important not just to boycott, but I think it's positive to do it's good to do something positive, and that is to support local businesses. When all you do is trade with the chains and all of your neighbors' small businesses go out of business, and I used to have a small business. So it's important for people to support those who are starting, who take the risk to be an entrepreneur in their local area. Support those people because they're going to be spending money in your area too. So, try to build that local economy. It's one of the things I like here about Austin is that it's one of the few places that I've lived where there's actually viable mid-level restaurant businesses. There was an article that was up on Drudge recently about how this one famous chef was saying that Obama was, with his increased regulation and with competition from major chains, they were squeezing out all the mid-level restaurants. So you had nothing but really high-end restaurants that were locally owned and national chains, and that was about it. So yeah, support your local businesses because that's going to help you in the long run. It may look like it's cheaper to go out and buy something from a big box store, but ultimately it's going to reverberate back in your own community.
Julio in Wyoming, you're on the air. Go ahead. Do we have Julio?
I think he's on.
Am I there, Paul?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I almost did a double take because you're here in the North American Union, so welcome across the pond, and don't stay in Austin too long. Go explore the United Nations national parks here in the United States, like Yellowstone here in Wyoming. It's beautiful. You could meet Dick Cheney, Paul.
That's not a very tempting prospect, to be honest.
It's beautiful out here, Paul. Anywho, the double speak, ISIS, ISIL,
we're going to war against war. War is peace. 2 plus 2 is 5. It's quite clear corporate media here in the United States and corporate media in Europe are doing their best to try to sell the propaganda that the multinational corporations want us to hear. And it's quite clear, especially more so in Europe, I see. You live in Europe, so I want to get your take, Paul, on how people aren't buying the bull from corporate media. I want to get your thoughts on that. And then secondly, Paul, I'm a journalist here in Wyoming. How can I interview you on what's going on in Europe?
The best way is to contact me on Facebook. But in terms of ISIS propaganda, I mean, the biggest propagandists for ISIS are the mainstream media. I mean, every time I turn on the mainstream media, CBS, CNN, they're showing ISIS propaganda videos. So, on the one hand, we've got David Cameron saying that we shouldn't watch ISIS propaganda. We got the Metropolitan Police in Britain saying that it may be a terrorist offence to even view these beheading videos. And yet every time I turn on CNN, there's an ISIS propaganda video. So again, we've had past investigations into who's behind the release of terrorist propaganda videos. It leads back to the Pentagon, Department of Defense, with Intel Center, with these other corporations that get the videos first. So the biggest progenitors of ISIS propaganda is the mainstream media itself, while we're being demonized, characterized as terrorists for even watching videos on YouTube. So, David Knight, your take on that?
Well, that may be changing, Paul, because they've taken away the prohibitions from directly addressing the American people with propaganda. Remember, since the Cold War, they had prohibitions against using Radio Free Europe and Voice of America here domestically. But just as we've seen the prohibitions on domestic surveillance of citizens fall by the wayside and be ignored, they have actually changed that law now that's going to allow them to directly propagandize us. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But certainly you're right. It's a mockingbird media. And I think it was just appalling when we saw at the end of the week last week the articles that have come to light about what happened with Gary Webb, that they dedicated at the Los Angeles Times 17 reporters to essentially destroy him because the CIA wanted his credibility taken away, because he had exposed the truth about their dirty little wars at the time. It wasn't in the Middle East, but they were really more focused down in Central America, and they were using the cocaine traffic there to fund their operations and running that cocaine into America, into California, essentially creating the crack cocaine craze. And he exposed that. And so they used the mainstream media to take him down. And that's starting to come to light now. And
I mean, what's your take on Gary Webb? Obviously, he exposed the CIA drug trade. There were some suspicious circumstances in his suicide, a double shotgun blast to the head. I mean, we got heat at the time for even questioning, if that was plausible, if he indeed was suicidal. I believe that was back in 2004. Did you research that? Did you look into that to see if it was plausible that he was suicidal? We know he was talking about,
well, he talked to Alex and said, I am not suicidal. He made it very clear. So did the D.C. madam. Yeah. She made it very clear. She said, I can tell you right now, if somebody kills me, I'm not in the frame of mind to commit suicide. We've heard that over and over again, and yet that doesn't stop them from saying somebody committed suicide.
It's amazing that, Alex makes the point often that he's never going to be in that mindset to commit suicide, and a lot of people do say that. Ultimately, it turns out to be tragic. We'll be back after the break. We're going to take more of your calls. John Rappaport coming up at the bottom of the hour. It's the Alex Jones Show live on this Sunday edition. Stay tuned, Infowars.com.
In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries in the area of health. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. DNA Force is one of the most expensive formulas to produce. Some of the ingredients in DNA Force are $12,000 a kilogram. We are using the coveted, patented, only American source of PQQ, CoQ10, and more. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? Well, we're bringing you a total win-win. The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. We have produced a limited run of DNA Force, and it will take up to 12 weeks to produce more once we sell out. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. DNA Force from InfoWars Life.
Andrew in Illinois to talk about riot control. Andrew, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, I was calling about there's this article in the American Industrial Hygiene Association Journal that talks about the liberation of hydrogen cyanide and hydrogen chloride, which is hydrochloric acid, during high temperature dispersion of CS riot control agent. That's what they used in Ferguson. So the reporters were being subjected to hydrogen cyanide and hydrochloric acid when those smoke grenades were used.
So is that a new development that they're deploying that?
They don't want to talk about the side effects of deploying that agent.
Well, they're always talking about these non-lethal things that they use on people, and I think it was you, Paul, that put out the article about them temporarily blinding people. It's a new device that they're trying to sell to the police. Yeah, these non-lethal things like rubber bullets and CS gas and tasers are not really non-lethal. And while I'm here riding shotgun, I'd be remiss to say that we were talking before about Gary Webb. You said he was shot twice in the head with a shotgun. It was a pistol, specifically a 38. So,
as I said in the interim there, I'm from the UK and we're completely disarmed, so I cannot distinguish between different kinds of weaponry. They're all the same to me.
Just know we're going to get a lot of comments about that if we don't mention that. So there we are. There's the correction. But nevertheless, it's still what happened to him is still horrendous, and it's still an obvious murder.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions at the time, I remember. And you just had an article up there on screen about this company that's created a weapon that blinds protesters. If you could get that back up, of course, we know in Ferguson that they deployed tear gas, they deployed all these militarized tactics, not only against protesters, but against the media. And now there's, new police compliance weapon, blinds targets, retinal obfuscation gun, a new tool for militarized law enforcement. And it's kind of bizarre that they would put a gun with bullets surrounding it on there. Obviously, that's not how the system works. They don't actually explain how it works in the promo for the company, and they sell numerous weapons to law enforcement authorities. So I guess we wait with anticipation, David, about the next new toy that the militarized police state will be deploying against protesters and journalists.
See how they'll make us comply. That's a compliance weapon. I love the euphemism there. It's very much like you see coming out of the Pentagon all the time, right?
It's pain compliance. I think they used a similar term in the promo for the new weapon that they've got coming out, I believe, in December. Pain compliance, which again is basically torture. That's how they enact their new measures in the new militarized police state in America. And in fact, since I've been in Austin, I've noticed that basically you live in an occupied city. There are police officers on every corner. In Britain, for example, there's an argument for what we call bobbies on the beat, but generally it's like a couple of police dispersed throughout several different areas of the city of London. But here, it seems like, David, there are a phalanx of cops, of law enforcement authorities almost on every single street corner. It seems like an occupied zone in Austin.
You're probably downtown around 6th Street.
Exactly,
That definitely is an occupied zone. When I went to England in the 80s, I was struck by how they actually did at that time have police walking beats, and that was, I thought, a very healthy thing. When I went back 20 years later, they were pretty much starting to get into cars like the American police here, and that means that they're not really doing anything to protect the citizens. Instead, they're really kind of looking for traffic violations and other things like that. That really focuses them on a completely different perspective.
It seems that way, that they're looking for minor infractions. And we're going to go to more calls in a moment. The call screen has gone dark for the moment. Let's just throw to whoever the next caller is on the line. If you could go ahead and go to the next caller. Who have we got on the air?
This is Indigo Kid.
Indigo Kid, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, you guys? I'll never kill myself either, so we can have a non-suicide pact. The three of us. I was going to call Alex the other day and tell him that I thought that there was going to be maybe gas attacks in New York City subways and in France. And then a couple hours after that, the Iraqi prime minister said the same thing. So I thought that was a weird connection. And I have a bad memory, but I believe they've done drills before in New York City for gas attacks. You know, they could blame it on Assad, saying he's working for ISIS, say we need to have boots on the ground. If they really wanted to run with it, they could say it was Iran working with ISIS.
I mean, there are a lot of scenarios. I think, you know, last year they really were going for the chemical weapons attack in Syria. Of course, the MIT report came out later on, which proved that the chemical weapons attack in Ghouta could not have possibly been launched from a government area. That kind of derailed the Obama administration's policy at that time. Of course, we had a lot of people within the military itself rebelling against that attack. Now we've got an attack on Syria, airstrikes on Syria, under the cover of fighting ISIS terrorists. But David, do you think there's a chemical weapons attack or a biological attack in the United States that they could use as justification for a real clampdown that we've been expecting for a while?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's not a matter of if, but when they'll do something like that. I mean, that's essentially what we see happening with 9/11. That's what we see happening with the 7/7 attacks in the UK. That's why Cameron is trying to demonize anybody that would speak out against that tactic. False flag tactics are something that every government has used, and it's a very well-known tactic. It's even now becoming a very common plot device in virtually all the movies. So it's a difficult thing for them to pull off, but they still can because they control the media. They control the narrative, and the media, wants access to them, will do whatever they say, essentially. So that's, you know, they've had Operation Mockingbird, the CIA controlling the press, as we mentioned earlier. That's how we got onto Gary Webb, the fact that they would have 17 journalists dedicated to destroy his credibility because of what he had revealed about the CIA's drug operations. That's a very telling sign. So, yes, they can do that, and certainly Alex has been fearful of that and talking about how he felt that was something that was impending.
And, of course, we had the Oklahoma beheading a couple of days ago, linked again to Anwar al-Awlaki, who, of course, dined at the Pentagon 3 months after 9/11, having been the mastermind behind the 9/11 hijackers who flew the plane into the Pentagon. So we can cover that later with the ties between al-Awlaki and the other patsies in the United States that have been behind domestic terror plots, and question whether the Oklahoma beheading was one of those. But we got John Rappaport coming up to talk about Ebola, the CDC whistleblower, and autism. This is the Alex Jones Show live, Infowars.com. Stay tuned. We're going to go to more of your calls, and we got Patricia in Arizona. Go ahead, Patricia.
Hi, Paul. It's good to talk to you. I actually called to thank you because I really feel that your contribution during the Massachusetts, the race, you know what I get on here now, I can't talk.
The Boston bombings.
The Boston bombing was instrumental in turning back their whole narrative. Between your contribution and Alex's evaluation of the situation, if you hadn't found those pictures, though, this could have been a whole different scenario. I really believe that, because they had just announced that they had found the bomber. They had escorted the press into that hotel, and then once Alex was talking about, oh, look at this. Oh, that's who they're going to make the patsy and all this. Why, within 5 minutes, they said there was a bomb scare there. They escorted all the press out, and then a van pulled up right in front of the front door there. They loaded some people in there, and they drove away. And then they said, no, that's not what was happening here. And I really always felt like the two were quite connected.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
it was amazing at the time to illustrate just the impact that we were having, and, you know, other alternative media outlets. For one day, immediately after the Boston bombings, Infowars.com got more traffic than the Drudge Report, which if you realise how huge the Drudge Report really is, you know, it drives more traffic to websites than Facebook and Twitter combined. And for one day, we were above the Drudge Report, which again is a huge honour. given the magnitude, the importance of what the Drudge Report represents, which again shows you how intensely locked in people were to following this narrative with the Boston bombings. And of course, now we have this recent beheading in Oklahoma, which has been linked back to the mosque at which one of the alleged Boston bombers attended. David Knight, your take on
yeah, it was kind of surreal when that was all happening. I remember one incident in particular when they arrested the Tsarnaev brothers and showed those photographs of them, and Leanne got it on the news right away and said, that backpack doesn't look like the backpacks, doesn't look anything at all like the backpacks that they had before. And within a few minutes, it was about 20 minutes, CNN had a former FBI agent, and they set up a little dog and pony show to say, look, they could have put a backpack inside of another backpack and pulled it out. I mean, they basically reacted to that with a really patently absurd explanation. If they were going to try to disguise the backpacks, then why didn't the older brother have a darker why didn't he have a different color backpack instead of a darker backpack? I mean, it didn't make any sense. But it was interesting to see that kind of back and forth, and that wasn't the only incident. That was just one that I remember very well. It really did have a big effect. I believe that they really were setting this up to blame it on some kind of anti-government patriot straw man that they had created.
And what was amazing was they arrested one of the Tsarnaev brother that later died, allegedly, during the manhunt for him. They arrested this man, a so-called arrest of a naked man, later allegedly released. But if you actually looked at the photos of this guy who was arrested, unscathed, unhurt during the manhunt for the Boston bombings, it was the Tsarnaev brother that later turned up dead. So
and his aunt identified him as such, said that's my nephew. Yeah, that we talked to in Canada. Yeah, it was an amazing situation. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff we see here. It is kind of surreal at times, isn't it?
Now you can watch the Alex Jones Show live as it happens at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
More than 60 movies and documentaries all in one place at Infowars.com/show.